Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Euro316. If you've never seen me before, this is me. So I picked up this Porsche Cayenne recently, and it has been a fantastic daily driver. For the past few weeks, it's been an awesome car. I drove it basically 3,000 miles from Texas to California, and it's been awesome. I'll go ahead and I'm going to make a video here pretty soon about basically the whole process of how I picked this thing up and everything else. But for right now, that's not really the point of this video. So the point of this video is I'm going to show you guys basically how to add CarPlay onto some of these older Porsches, because at the time when the system was released, it was at a time where the Apple iPhone wasn't even really mainstream, and technology was just completely different. It's really mainly just Blackberries, Motorola Razr phones, all this other stuff. That's when original development of this system actually came forward and came to. So you can kind of tell it's very antiquated. Now, the advantage is it does have a full color screen, and you can kind of utilize that to add CarPlay onto it. And the motherboard that's on here actually is capable enough to do the bridge modification that we're going to do today. So this modification that we're going to do today is going to apply to basically any of these Porsches from basically 2010 to about 2016 or 17. So if you have a Porsche Macan, a Porsche Cayenne, a Porsche Panamera, the Boster, or the Cayman, any one of those cars that has this PCM 3.1 system, you're going to basically be able to utilize it and do this modification. You can tell the Porsche PCM because you're always going to see the same kind of setup here. It's always going to look very familiar. So you're going to have these two rotary knobs, and then you'll have a lot of these multi-function buttons right here. So like Navi, map, phone, etc. If you have one of the first gen Cayennes, you're not going to be able to do this modification. If you have a very early, I think like pre-2010 Boster, you're not going to be able to do this modification. But anything after that that has this PCM system, you're going to PCM 3.1 system, you're going to be good to go. So I hope you guys can follow along here, and I hope I can teach you how to do this, and I'm going to try to make it as straightforward as possible. And yeah, let's get right into it. Went ahead and took everything out of the box there. Came in extremely packaged, extremely nice, which I like to see. But I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I laid everything out on a workbench, and you should basically do the same thing, or a desk, to make sure you have everything. So first, you're going to have two ribbon cables. Make sure you have those. Some riser pads and some screws. The PCB board, which you want to damage or inspect it for damage. Obviously, make sure none of this is like broken off through shipping or something. But this one is extremely nice, and honestly, like, it has a bit of a gloss to it. I could almost see myself through this. The quality of this is very, very good, so I'm impressed with that. Shout out to them. When it comes to your connection points, you're going to make sure you have this Wi-Fi antenna, because if you didn't know, CarPlay does use Wi-Fi and able to assist with the connection, so you want to make sure you have this. It's going to come with all this wiring right here. Do not be intimidated. You really don't need to use most of this. So a lot of these connections that you see, once we get into the install, you're not using pretty much any of it. You don't have to do any splicing or anything crazy unless you're trying to add like a 360 camera or a backup camera or whatever the case is. Then you'll have to go in and do some splicing. Besides that, it's just plug and play connections. All right, then make sure you have this harness right here that's going to go for basically from the PCB board straight into the decoder box. Make sure you have the decoder box itself. This is going to be basically the gateway for all the connections. And then lastly, make sure you have this large quad connector harness, because this is what translates a lot of the old information on the old system into the new system. This is what allows interplay between the new and the old system. So make sure you guys have all of this stuff. I'll leave it on frame for a second, that way you can kind of take a look and make sure, but you definitely want to make sure you have that before we move on. Alright guys, so we're here in the garage and we're about to start on doing the CarPlay mod. One thing I did want to tell you guys, just so you're aware, and this is something that does sometimes come up when people try to do these types of modifications on certain cars. You have to keep in mind that this type of panel, this type of screen, is not the same type of screen on your iPhone, right? So if you think about your iPhone, you can usually, you can put 3 fingers, 2 fingers on there, you can drag things around, all this other stuff, right? When it comes to these cars, so let's say like 2010 to about 2017 period range, when it comes to these cars and several others, honestly, they used a panel which is more of like a capacitive touchscreen, right? So think back to like 2008, 2009, around that time, how a lot of the smartphones were. You can, technically it is touch, right? But it's more so, it's touch in its most primitive form, okay? So the CarPlay is still going to work with this. Everything's going to be okay, whatever the case is, but it's not going to let you do some of the smooth scrolling stuff that you can do on an iPhone, because you have to keep in mind the technology was just completely different. And there's nothing that you can add to this old system here that's going to modernize the screen, right? You can't, us doing this modification and installing a custom PCB board to enable CarPlay into the motherboard of this is not going to magically transform the screen into something that was built 10, 15 years after. That's not how technology works, okay? So I want you guys to keep that in mind, because once we do start and do all this, I would hate for you to, you know, try to go through this entire thing and then you're like, oh, well, you know, I strictly want to be able to, you know, use it like my phone. It doesn't work that way. Instead, what ends up happening is you're going to basically primarily use this right here to kind of scroll through the icons on CarPlay. And then, you know, if you want to touch something, like you want to click Apple Music after you're scrolling here, then okay, touch, right? But you're not going to be able to do this right here. That's not how this screen works, if that makes sense. For some of you, you're not going to understand what I mean until you start using it. But for a lot of you others, you know, this is like for most people, this is like a minor thing, and it's something you could easily work around. So it's kind of a little bit of a disclaimer, because again, you know, I want to teach you guys stuff and show you guys how to do this type of thing, but I don't want stupid comments like, how come I can't, you know, use this thing the same way I use my phone? Well, I just told you, completely different screen, 10, 15 years of technology completely apart. It's just different in every single way. All right, so second disclaimer is obviously we're working on electrical components, and they're not necessarily the cheapest electrical components, right? So be careful when you're doing this. If you have any doubt that you can't do something like this, go to a professional, go to someone who knows what they're doing, show them this video, give them the instructions, whatever, and have them do it for you. Don't do this if you've never worked on a car before at all, okay? Because there's certain things like how to use a screwdriver, how to use a flathead, how to, you know, take out certain connections, blah, 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 that you really need to be careful with to avoid damage. So I'll tell you that so you don't damage your own car. I can only help you so much, but nobody can help you with your own mechanical skills, okay? All right, so first thing you're going to do is you're going to come over to the AC vents, and you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4. There's silver kind of indentation tabs that are behind all of this, and you'll see them off to the side. What you're going to do is you want to take like a dentist tool or a thin tool, or what I use these actual Porsche tools right here, and then what you're going to do is you're going to basically pop those tabs out. So the ones on the right are going to come towards the middle. The ones on the left are also going to come towards the middle. You're going to pop them out. You're going to go one by one. If you can do it if you have 2 of these tools, then you can put one in on one side, another in on another side, and try to squeeze them together. That way you can get 2 at the same time, but you know, you could also do 1 at a time. So be very careful. You don't want to break the metal retainer clip that's there off to the side, and you don't want to break any of these plastic fins. So you're going to go ahead and do that, and you're going to do that for both sides. Take your time. All right, so we got this one out, and you can see the metal tabs off to the side there. Sometimes if you can just get one loose, if you're careful enough, then the other one will get even more loose. Loosen that one a bit, and then honestly, sometimes even just 2 will be enough for you to kind of just like shimmy this thing out. So just be careful again, because you don't want to break anything. Go to the back of it. You're going to see some electrical connections. Go ahead and disconnect those carefully. They're very easy to remove. All right, second one is out. As you can see, I used my fancy Porsche tool for this one, even though I used the flathead for that side. Usually, again, 1 or 2 is enough to get the whole thing popped out with some momentum, and you can kind of just shimmy it on the way out. All right, so next thing that you're going to do is once you remove those AC vents, you're going to take note of 4 Torx 27 bolts that are going to basically be securing this entire PCM system. So want to make sure that you use the right tool. Don't use like a flathead or a screwdriver or try to get something that's not supposed to go in there. Don't do that. Make sure that you get a Torx 27. Let me get the camera to focus there a little bit. Torx 27, and make sure that you go ahead and remove these bolts carefully. Make sure that they don't fall behind any of these crevices over here. As a quick side note, you want to make sure that you place some type of rag, preferably microfiber. Place that over your trim. That way you're not accidentally scratching these sensitive buttons and display panels down here as you're removing this. This is all going to simply just come straight out towards you. Be sure to use both hands. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to take it out, then you're going to rest it on top of the shift knob right here, and then disconnect all of the cabling that's in the rear. And disconnecting that is pretty simple. Once you take a look at it, you'll know how to remove it. Alright, so I went ahead and removed everything from the rear of the PCM. That's how it's going to look like. You have the quad connector, a yellow connector, a black, a blue, and another black. Depending on the year that you have and the options that your car is also equipped with, you could have more or less, but for the most part, this is what it's going to look like. So after you have all of this stuff right here removed, you're going to go ahead and make sure you grab this PCM carefully, and we're going to head back indoors so we can start kind of like our mini surgery on this thing. Alright, so now that we're back indoors, we're about to start the most important part of this entire procedure, and the part where you can damage this, okay? So you need to be very careful. First thing I want you to do is I want you to basically press the power button here, or this kind of like knob. So let me try to do that with one hand. You're going to press and hold that for about 10 seconds. And you're only really doing that just so you can kind of drain out the system of any excess like electric current that's going through it. But you basically just want to press and hold a few of these buttons, you know, a few seconds all the way around, just to avoid any type of like, you know, increased chance of static discharge. So just go ahead, press it around, and that should be good enough. Okay, after you do that, go ahead and turn it around. And what you're going to see right here on the lower portion of the PCM is you're going to see 1, 2, 3 T9 screws that you're going to need to remove first. So before we do anything, just go ahead and remove those 3 first, and then I'll show you what to remove after that. Alright, so at this point you're going to go ahead and you're going to switch out your tool for something that's basically a flathead. So let me try to focus here. If you can see my tool, it has a tip that's a flathead. Switch it out for this. You're going to come over here and you're going to remove these two, pull up on these 2 latches. And what that's going to let you do is it's going to let you remove this plastic trim here, which you could already see is kind of loose just by design. You're going to go ahead and pull up on these 2, and that'll allow you to remove it. Alright, so this is the trim piece removed right here. And now we have access to these 2 T8 screws that are at the top right here as well. Go ahead and remove both of them. So remove this one and then remove that one right there. Alright, so next thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead, come over to basically the side of the radio, and what you're going to see is you're going to see that there's locks right here. So this is the first lock right here. What you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to place a flathead or a thin tool of some type, and then you're basically going to place it in there, and then you're going to pull on it to disengage it. And then go ahead and flip it over to the other side and do this one as well. So if we zoom out, take a look here, there we go. So that top one has been disengaged as well, and then you have 2 more locks. One is going to be on this side right here. You're going to flip it over and you're going to see the same exact thing as well. Go ahead and press it on these as well. Okay, now you're going to flip it over to the side that has the hard drive. The side that has the hard drive is going to be this area right here. This is the hard drive over here, and then you're going to see these warranty stickers. You're going to observe 2 T8 screws that are basically attached to the mount of the locks and the front facing fascia over here. Go ahead and remove these as well. So 1 and 2 right there, go ahead and remove those. Alright, so after making sure that you went ahead and removed all the screws from each side that I pointed out, you're basically going to pull on this face from each side right here. So each corner, should be 5 corners in general. You're going to pull on that, and it's basically going to reveal these 2 ribbon cables that are down here. So that's how it's going to essentially look like. What we're going to do now is we're going to place a thin pick tool, and we're going to go ahead and remove those ribbon cables. Alright, so as you can see here, if you just come over to the side and you just kind of pull up, so pull up on that from the bottom, pull up on that from the bottom, that one. If you do that, then it's basically going to loosen this connector. So you can press it back down to lock it, press it back up to unlock it. Once you do that, you can slide these cables out. Go ahead and put the display for now just off to the side. Come over to these warranty stickers right here and just go ahead and kind of break them, because if you're doing this, you're out of warranty. Okay, so after you go ahead and break that sticker off to the side, the little warranty sticker, the reason why you're going to do that is because if you come back around over here, what you're going to do is you're going to use both hands, one on each one, and you're basically going to push this thing in, right? So you're pushing it away. The QR code should be facing you, these ribbon cables should be facing you, and then this upper half right here is going to simply slide out that way. So towards my computer monitor here, that's where this is going to be sliding out. And then this again, similar to how the screen opened up kind of like a sandwich, this thing is going to do the same thing. So it's going to open up and you can kind of rest it on its side. All right, so next thing you're gonna do is, once you're inside of this thing and have it open, is you're gonna come over here. You're gonna remove this T8 screw. You'll come over here, you'll remove this one right here, off into the corner, kind of buried. And then the last one is actually hidden kind of underneath this. If you can kind of see it right there. So right where I'm pointing at. Go ahead and remove those three with your T8 tool, and then we'll go on to the next step. All right, so next thing you're gonna do is go ahead and just mount your gold posts. So I only did two just because I don't have the XM board here. So I did one over here off into the corner, and basically we're just gonna seat the board on top. But before we do that, there's a few more things we have to do. If you have an XM Sirius board, you can use multiple, so you'll have to actually configure it like this. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our ribbon cables. You're gonna take the large one, just grab it here. Okay, take the large one, come over to the first large tab right here. You're gonna lift up on it, and then you're gonna go ahead and insert this ribbon cable into that slot right there. All right, so I'm trying to zoom in the best I can here, but you want it to be as flush as possible, just like this right here. So maybe that's a little bit better of an image, but you want it to be extremely flush. You do not want it to be crooked, otherwise it's not gonna translate the information well. You might get a black screen, etc. So what you're gonna do now, after you do that first one, go right behind it, go to the second one right here, and repeat the same procedure with the smaller cable. All right, so it should look exactly like this. They're both even, they're both flush, and they're both seated. All right, so next thing you're gonna see is, if you don't have an XM board, you're gonna see the security plate that's over here. Just remove the T8 from it, and you'll be able to punch that out. You'll just be able to wiggle it out, because we're gonna need to use this to actually get through and to mount the board and some of the other wiring. All right, and as you can see here, it just kind of comes out. All right, so now you're gonna pull the harness that has these two white plugs at the end of it. Okay, so now what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and route this cable here, the one that had the two white plugs, route it through that little access port. Long end goes into the board. Go ahead and secure the board with whichever posts you had. Just obviously put the screws back on top, secure it like so. And then what you're gonna do is, you have these two old ribbon cables. You're gonna go ahead, you're gonna plug them into the new board right here. So the one in the front, or the two in the front, those are gonna be the ones that came with the kit. The two in the rear, those are gonna be the ones that basically came from the factory, from the car. Go ahead and plug those in right into these two right here. Let me see if I can adjust the camera. Right there, 1, 2, plug them in. All right, so afterwards, this is how this is gonna look. So these are the two new cables that are attached to the board. You just kind of run them in through the front, just like how the old ones were. And then these old ones, they kind of just like loop around into the new board, which is sitting here on top now, into these two sockets right here. So it's a little bit of a simpler design. I've done these installs in the past, and on the older style boards, the ones that are more commonly found from like China and whatever the case is, there's a few more connections that you have to make, and it's a little bit aggravating. So the smaller board does make it a little bit easier. And then this one connection, you're basically making like one connection that goes straight into the board, as opposed to before on some of the older designs I've tried, it's like two connections here, and then you have some antenna connections and whatever the case is, and then the board is a lot larger. So I gotta say, this design is a little bit more compact. It's definitely easier to work with. Here's an overhead view. I'll pause on that just for a second, just so you can kind of see. But it's a lot more simple. There's really nothing crazy to it. You have that wire running out of the open access door now. The two new cables sticking into the front, or sticking out of the front. The two old ones are connected to the new PCB board, and then the new PCB board is basically resting on top of the factory motherboard. All right, so now that we have this all closed back up, you should just have those two video cables sticking out of the front, and then obviously this kind of pigtail connector sticking out of the back. So go ahead, apply the screen back to the front video cables right here. All right, so just like this, you want to go ahead and reinsert those two front-facing cables into the display, and then go ahead and just put it back together. All right, so at this point we got the PCM reassembled, so everything's all secure now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and grab our other accessories. So you're going to grab the Wi-Fi / Bluetooth antenna. You'll grab this large harness and pigtail, and then you'll grab the gateway box right here. And then obviously the large black quad harness. So get everything that, that came with the kit, and then we're gonna go ahead and go back to the vehicle. All right, so we're back into the car right now. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna start connecting some of the wiring and then routing it all through, and then hopefully firing this thing up. Go ahead and take out this large black quad harness right here. That's gonna be the first thing that we're gonna deal with. All right, so now that we have this connected, as you can see, the old one is connected to the new bypass section on the new harness, and then this side of the new harness is gonna go to the back of the radio, the factory radio. If you have those fiber optic cables, if applicable, you're gonna go ahead and place them in the same exact spots that they were in before, and then this again is gonna go into the back of the PCM that we have over here. So we just wanna go ahead and make sure that this is all good to go, because this is a very important harness. Now this end of the new harness, you can see the small little pigtail. This right here is actually going to connect into the gateway box that we have down here. So it's actually going to go down there. However, we got to figure out where we're going to snake this, because you want to snake this in a spot that essentially is going to lead to where you mount that gateway box, if that makes sense. So we don't want to just put it anywhere. We want to put it wherever we're going to be able to put the gateway box. All right, so where I decided to go ahead and mount the wiring is, this is just a personal kind of preference for me, but I'm mounting it here. So I'm gonna put the box and everything into the glove box essentially. And there's a few reasons why I wanna do that. Number one, in case I ever have a failure with this thing, I'll be able to retrieve it pretty easily and get it switched out or whatever the case is. I've seen a lot of people, they'll put them, you know, to the far left or far right or whatever the case is, or behind the dash. I don't wanna do that, because I kind of know if I do that, thinking that I'll never have to retrieve it again, then I'll be in a situation where I take everything back, you know, apart again. So my personal preference is I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna pop this glove box light out because I don't even use it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just mount this thing in here. So it'll just basically rest in there. Nobody's gonna mess with it. Nobody's gonna touch it besides me, because it's my car anyway. So I think that's gonna be the best route for me personally. You can of course ignore that and mount it somewhere else. That's just what I'm going to do. All right, so what I ended up doing is I actually didn't install this camera wiring, because I kind of don't need it, because I don't plan on using the aux audio connection that's within the car, and I also don't plan on using any other cameras with this car. So I was able to basically skip that. And so the way that I connect my audio to this thing is I connect to both the PCM and I connect to the CarPlay system on the car. That's kind of like the workaround and how I honestly kind of like it. Essentially, I'm connecting my phone to the PCM, like the factory PCM, and using that for the audio while using the CarPlay stuff on top, because that's going to be what ultimately gives you the best audio. You don't want to use the aux thing right there if you have something like Harman Kardon or Bose or Burmeister or whatever the case is. And also, even if you just have the bass system, it's just a better idea to route your sound through the PCM and take your calls through the PCM while using the CarPlay stuff on the top, and that's kind of like a big advantage to it. So yeah, I routed everything through here in the glove box. I'm gonna go ahead and fix this up and make it neat and everything, but for the most part, this is where I want this to live. This is just the more, I guess, like common sense placement for it. If this thing starts bugging out, this is your gateway, so this is how you reset everything anyway, right? These are your switches and everything else. This is gonna be the main focus. So that's why I kind of put that there. Also, another thing, and I guess the third reason why, is because if I do plan on selling this car, do you really think I want to go ahead and open this thing up and take the board out and all this? No, I don't. You know, all I'm going to do is basically just take this box out. That way it kind of disables the CarPlay portion, and then leave it as is, you know, and it's good to go from that aspect. So that's just my personal reasoning for it. You know, unless the new owner obviously wants CarPlay, then great. But if not, I'm just gonna rip it out and then, you know, pigtail everything, hide it really neatly, and then, you know, everything will be good to go from there. So I hope this kind of showed you how to do this installation. I'm gonna go ahead and put everything back together. I really didn't need to remove this lower portion. You see it on the ground right now. That's kind of irrelevant. I was trying to route things and I figured maybe it'd give me more space, but it kind of didn't. But that's honestly another place where if you wanted to, instead of putting this here, you could even move it just down there, like kind of at the foot panel. It's really up to you. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes to just kind of route that down there if you'd like to do that, but if not, then whatever. So I hope this taught you guys something. So let's go ahead and go into the CarPlay thing. This is pretty smooth, actually. It's pretty quick and it's very vibrant compared to the dull. I mean, if I switch back to the old screen, all you do is press and hold car, and okay, go away from that. And then we go back into the old screen, and I just do not like this, man. It's just very antiquated, very ugly, but I mean, all your settings and stuff like that are still going to be there in case you want them. But otherwise, you can just press and hold car, just like this, and it goes into the CarPlay menu right here, and you're good to go from there. This is what I was saying. It's like you can't use this the same way as your iPhone, not as smooth, because it's just a different type of screen. So the easiest way to do it is just use the knob here, and then just like if you want to select something, click messages, like something like that, right? Or let's see, podcasts. Okay, cool. Maybe I'll go back. And then you kind of use a combination of the two, and that's honestly the easier way to do it. So it's very similar to, a lot of the older touchscreen phones. There's only so much technology you can do with, with these emulator boxes, but you can't necessarily replace the screen unless you actually go through and replace the entire screen, and that'll probably come in another video here pretty soon. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions for me, definitely let me know. And yeah, links for everything that I use will be in the comments, in the comments and in the description of the video. Hopefully this goes as smooth for you as it did for me. The only thing left for me to do really is just bolt this back up, put the AC vents back on, some of the trim, and we're really good to go. Alright, so I'm inside of the Cayenne. I'm just gonna basically go over how to use this. So basically, if you press and hold this back arrow that's on your PCM, it switches it back to the factory stuff. You still have access to all this. None of that has really changed. I mean, you can still see that everything, that came with the car is still here. If you want to switch back over to CarPlay, you literally just press and hold that back arrow button for about 2 seconds, and you're back into CarPlay. So a few things that have bothered me, and I say that very loosely because I'm not really too, anal or OCD about things. But one is like sometimes when you first get into the vehicle, one thing I have noticed is this, volume knob. The volume will be extremely low, and you'll have to kind of mess with it a few times to finally get the audio to catch up. But after it catches up, then it's not really an issue. But that's something, if you notice that, don't freak out. The volume won't change essentially. You'll notice it's really quiet and you'll have to play with it. I don't know if that's something I screwed up or whatever the case is throughout the case of the install, but I've noticed, once I play around with it, then it basically comes back online, and then it's good to go. All right, so to get a little bit technical with it, if I had to explain it in a technical term, I'd probably say it's a little bit of like input interference and lag from basically having, two signals that are transmitting this signal into basically two separate systems. I mean, that's kind of like one of those things where it's like if you've ever messed with aftermarket or retrofitting anything, there's always going to be quirks. It's just one of those things. But for the most part, it's like once the volume catches up, then it's good to go. Next thing, I guess like pretty much the last thing, is whenever you're using this right here, the multifunction display, I've noticed that sometimes it'll inadvertently, again, change a song or something on here. It'll like go forward and backwards on a song on here. That happens sometimes, and I think what happens is this sends the signal to both the PCM and the gauge cluster, and when it does that, those two get priority over the line, right? So imagine you have 3 lanes, 3 lanes of traffic, right? This right here is trying to merge, and it's going to merge first and foremost into this and into that right there, because they have priority, because that's the way that the car's ECU and the PCM and the entire, electronics on the car, that's how it's wired. So they're always going to have priority. So because of that, you can't bypass this, because you'd be bypassing the cluster and the PCM. But at the same time, this is programmed to be able to use this. And what ends up happening is sometimes you're messing with this and it accidentally changes a song or whatever the case is on here. So the way around that is to use, instead of using your Bluetooth signal to transmit, your music into the PCM, switch it over to the CarPlay amplifier. So earlier I was saying I usually keep it on the PCM. If that's something that's going to bother you and you're too lazy to just press next or forward, whatever the case is. If that's something that's going to bother you, then I mean, really your other option is to set your phone to use the CarPlay signal and route all the audio through CarPlay instead of, you know, having the two separate things like what I was saying earlier. And then that way, you know, this doesn't really matter because it's all on the same line. That's it's hard to explain, but it's easy once you start using it. I guarantee you get what I'm saying, and you'll see exactly what I'm saying once you start messing with it. That's really about it. You know, everything else, it's basically a no-brainer. It really ties in the interior of the car together. This isn't the first CarPlay modification I've done on a European car or any other car, but at the same time, you know, it always breathes, you know, kind of like a breath of new life into whatever car I'm installing it into, or, you know, and it's just one of those things I do appreciate, do like. The last thing is, like, obviously, I know this is going to get asked because people just don't understand technology, but you're not going to be able to display CarPlay maps on this right here. That's not how that works. This is basically an overlay of, like, technology that's like 13 years, 14 years newer than when this car came out. So it's just not going to work that way. This doesn't even know what CarPlay is. This is tied in strictly to the PCM at itself at a very base firmware level, right? There's no way that this is going to be able to display your CarPlay maps and everything on here. That's just not how it works. That's not how technology works. It doesn't matter if you have a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, or whatever. Anytime I've done, you know, and I've done CarPlay retrofits on those high-end cars, and I can tell you that's just not how technology works, right? It's just the same way that you can't add touchscreen onto like a TV from 2004. No matter what you add to it, you're not going to be able to do that. It's the same concept here. So anyway, I hope this helps you out. You know, I've tried to make this video as detailed as I could, and obviously add this little bit of, you know, extra towards the end to show you guys a realistic usage portion of it. I really do hope it helps you out. And if you guys get stuck on something, you can always let me know. If you still get stuck on something and I'm too slow to respond, obviously reach out to whoever you buy these kits from. I'm going to leave links to what I purchased and what I trust and use and everything in the description, just because I've done my own vetting and I've had my own experience with knowing what to use and knowing what not to use. Without me being, you know, super rude about it and saying some disparaging comments towards certain other companies I've dealt with, that's the best way I can put it. If I'm using it, there's probably a reason why I'm using it and probably not something else. But at the same time, if you guys are having trouble, you know, I might not know the ins and outs of every other system that's on the market and every other electronic, you know, that's out there. So this is just me doing a personal project on my Cayenne. I love this thing, but, you know, I like it even more now with the CarPlay. So, hey, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, dislike, whatever you guys want to do. I appreciate you for watching. Be safe out there, and be safe when you're working on your cars, as always. Thanks.